When Jade Janks' stepfather suffered a bad fall in December 2020, she stepped up to help. They were close, so close that he still called her his daughter, even after divorcing her mother. But just days before he was set to return home, Janks made a shocking discovery while tidying his apartment, one that would send her world spiraling into darkness. Less than 2 weeks later, he was found dead under a pile of trash in his own driveway. What happened in those crucial days, and what was the devastating truth that turned their once loving bond into something far more sinister? This is a story of the horrifying discovery that shattered a woman's trust and led to a crime that no one saw coming. 2021, the first day of the new year. When everyone's busy making their New Year resolutions, a call comes into the sheriff's department. A guy on the line frantically said that one of his friends had just confessed to murder. According to him, his friend told him she'd drugged, suffocated, and strangled a man who was none but her own stepdad. The woman he's referring to is Jade, a person everybody in the neighborhood knows and actually gets along with. She's one of those types who always appear to have their act together. Nice, cooperative, the type who delivers soup to your doorstep if you were ill. You see, the entire situation sounded flat-out unbelievable. Most importantly, she essentially played nurse to her stepdad, Thomas Merriman, preparing his meals, visiting him, ensuring he was all right. But when the cops got a search warrant and started digging around, they found something straight out of a nightmare. Turns out one day Jade accidentally triggered the screensaver on Thomas's computer. And what pops up? A naked photo of herself in the shower. Imagine that shock, but that's not the end. As they searched deeper, they uncovered not just one, but hundreds of similar nude pictures of her. Basically, this man, her so-called father, had been stalking her in secret for who knows how long. And after that, Jade couldn't sleep without having a knife beside her. When the detectives brought her in, they grilled her about what really happened. Did she smother him with a plastic bag? Did she strangle him with a cord? Jade denied everything, said she never wanted him dead. And the crazy part? The forensic experts couldn't even find any signs of strangulation. Even the prosecution's own guy admitted there was no proof she'd done what they were accusing her of. All this was taking place in San Diego County, a fairly relaxed community where something like this didn't exactly hit the headlines daily. Thomas was a known face in town, particularly due to the butterfly farms he operated in partnership with someone else. It was a non-profit committed to butterfly conservation, based in Encinitas, California. The people knew him and liked him. Janks first met Merriman when she was just 14 and back when he married her mom. Even after he and her mom split up, they stayed pretty close. Janks always called him Dad, and he used to call her his daughter. They had that kind of bond. Fast forward to April 2020, during the whole COVID lockdown scene, Janks moved into the house right next door to Merriman. Their neighbor, Ramona, remembers inviting Merriman over for dinner once, but he politely turned her down, saying, "Nah, I always eat with my daughter." That's how close they were. But then came December 23, 2020, the day everything changed. The last time anyone saw Thomas alive was New Year's Eve 2020. He was sitting in Jade's SUV, looking weak, feet dangling out of the car, with his walker in front of him. The guy actually had been through hell, a bad fall, heart problems, liver issues, the works. Jade had just brought him home from the hospital, trying to take care of him like she always did. On New Year's Day, neighbors spotted Jade out in the driveway tossing out boxes and trash. Later, she even knocked on a neighbor's door, apologizing for the mess she'd made, but said she'd cleaned it up. Nobody thought much of it, until the cops came poking around the same spot where the dirt looked freshly disturbed. And that's when the whole twisted story started to uncover. The cops showed up at this house hours after they got a sketchy phone call about a possible murder. The guy they were looking for was Thomas Merriman. But when they knocked, and even went inside, there was no sign of him. Instead, they found his stepdaughter, Jade Janks. She appeared relaxed, jumped into her vehicle, and drove away, but not before the officers pulled her over for a quick interrogation. Jade told them she had seen Thomas the last time when she picked him up from the hospital the previous day, but she did not know where he was now. The police released her, assuming perhaps she was telling the truth. They searched all night, nothing, no leads, and then, after sunrise, when one of the officers was making her way along the driveway and saw a trash bag pile on the ground, something didn't seem right to her. She pushed one bag aside, and there it was, the body outline. Tom Merriman lay there, still in his pajamas and clutching his hospital bracelet. And the wildest part? The whole setup was just sitting there in broad daylight, right in the middle of the driveway like nobody would notice. That's when the cops knew they had their prime suspect, Jade Janks. On January 2nd, 2021, they arrested her. When they tried to question her again, Jade lawyered up and refused to talk. That's when the police started digging into the mysterious phone call that kicked off the investigation in the first place. Turns out the tip came from Jade's friend, Adam Sipliak. He told the cops Jade had called him to her apartment, asking for help moving a body, like it was some casual favor or something. Adam said hell no and went on to tell the whole thing to the police, stating Jade had confessed to drugging Tom with a bunch of sleeping pills and then strangling him. But here's where things got messy. The autopsy didn't really back up that version of the story. There were no signs of strangulation. What they did find was a bunch of zolpidem in Tom's system, the stuff in Ambien. The dose wasn't fatally high though, so it could have been an accidental overdose, especially since Tom wasn't in great health. But the cops weren't buying it. What really turned the heat on Jade was her phone. The investigators found text messages that straight up looked like a blueprint for how to get rid of Tom. But the whole reason this nightmare even started? It took place a few days before Christmas, when Tom was in the hospital. While cleaning her stepdad Tom's apartment, she accidentally woke up his computer screen. There it was, a picture of her own breast staring back at her. At first, she probably thought her mind was playing tricks on her. But nah, it was real. A whole damn slideshow of private photos she had taken over the years. Photos she'd never shared with anyone, definitely not with a stepdad. Tom had been like a father figure to her since she was a teenager. They were close, or at least that's what she thought, but in that moment everything shattered. The worst part? He was still in the hospital, but he'd be back soon. And she lived right next door. Her mind started racing. What if he knew she saw the photos? What if he tried to hurt her to keep her quiet? The fear was eating her alive. She couldn't even shower without feeling like someone was watching. That's when she reached out to a guy people in town whispered about, Alan Roach, aka the Fixer. On paper, he was just a security guard, but if you needed a problem to disappear without asking too many questions, Alan is your guy. If it reminds you of Mike Ehrmantraut from Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, you are on the right track. Jade didn't want him to do anything, though. At least that's what she claimed. She just needed someone to have her back when Tom came home. But the prosecutors, they weren't buying it. They said the second Jade made that call, the whole thing turned into a murder plot. When Tom's body turned up under a pile of garbage 2 years later, they pinned it on her, saying she planned the whole thing, with a little help from Alan. Jade's lawyer argued it was all just a terrible accident, that Tom's own cocktail of prescription meds did him in. Her friends and family stood by her too, swearing up and down that she could never hurt anyone, especially not someone who had been like a dad to her. But let's be real, finding those photos, it changes everything. Suddenly, Jade wasn't just some woman on trial. She was a victim, a woman pushed to the edge. When she took the stand, her voice cracked as she described how betrayed she felt, how unsafe she had been in her own home. Maybe she wanted Tom gone, but did she actually plan to kill him? Or did fear cloud her judgment so badly that everything just spiraled out of control? Was Jade a cold-blooded killer? Or just a woman trying to protect herself from the man who had stolen her sense of safety? We will come to the answers slowly. But before that, if you have made it up there, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Just that simple and momentary click of yours will keep us motivated to bring more. So that New Year's Eve, even though Jade wasn't really feeling it, she stepped up to help out Tom, her stepdad, who was fresh out of rehab. She was mostly focused on getting his hands on meds, calling her up early in the morning, begging for codeine because he couldn't sleep. By 11 a.m., she picked him up from the rehab center, noticing he had a bag full of pills, Ambien included, the same stuff that later caused his death. Once they got into the car, Tom started rummaging around looking for more meds. He even swiped some from Jade's own prescription stash. He seemed okay at first, well enough that when they stopped at a shopping plaza, Jade popped into a few stores to grab some supplies. Gloves, towels, spray paint, and a nylon cord. Stuff she said was for a painting project. She liked to seal off her work area with plastic to avoid making a mess. Meanwhile, she was waiting to hear back from her friend Alan Roach, but he never responded. With no other options, she took Tom home, but the guy was out of it, barely able to walk. She tried to get him inside but couldn't, so she drove him back to rehab, hoping they'd help. But the staff refused to let her in because of COVID rules, so she had no choice but to take him back home. Again. By this point, she was exhausted and desperate for help. Meanwhile, Alan flaked, sending his buddy Brian Salomon instead, but Brian dipped without lifting a finger. This was the reason Jade called another friend, Adam, to come over. When he arrived, she broke down crying about how she couldn't get Tom out of the car. Instead of helping, Adam got upset and left too. With no one left to help, Jade made Tom as comfortable as she could in the car and left him there overnight. The next morning, when she went to check on him, she touched his leg and realized he was cold. He was gone. Panicked and scared she'd get blamed, she didn't call 911 right away. Instead, she tried and failed to move his body inside before covering him with a blanket and hiding him under some empty boxes. At the trial, Jade swore up and down that she never meant to hurt Tom. But the prosecutors painted a whole different picture, saying she drugged him on purpose and staged the whole thing to look like an overdose. They pointed to her DNA on the Ambien package, not Tom's, and dug up digital records that supposedly showed her plotting everything as it happened. Jade's phone was literally a ticking time bomb for her case. As we mentioned earlier, the cops found messages that were straight up shady. But what was in it? And it was a back-and-forth chat with that fixer, Alan Roach. She basically told him she'd given Tom a heavy dose of something strong. Then there was another text where she said she was making a pit stop to give the drugs enough time to knock him out completely. The prosecutors were like, yup, that's premeditation right there. Now Jade tried playing it off, saying she was just buying stuff for some painting project. Brushes, tape, the whole deal. But the cops never believed this story. The CCTV footage showed her picking up zip ties, gloves, rope, and towels, more like a murder starter pack than a DIY project. And by midday, the whole plan was already falling apart. Tom was waking up way sooner than she expected. You could see her panic through the texts, message after message to Alan, begging him to come help. But Alan, as we said, he simply ghosted her. Then, when Brian showed up as Alan's substitute, Jade allegedly asked him to strangle Tom. But Brian also left without doing anything. Now, with no backup, Jade was spiraling. Around 3 p.m., she texted Alan again, saying she was this close to losing her temper because Tom was getting aggressive. And that's when she dropped the creepiest text, something about how she couldn't keep a kicking body in her truck. By 4:08 p.m., finally, Tom was dead. His body was found dumped in the driveway under a pile of trash. That last text she sent, "He's up, I guess I'm on my own," sealed the deal for the prosecution. Their theory was that she tried suffocating him with a plastic bag. When that didn't work fast enough, she might have strangled him, except the autopsy showed no marks on his neck. That threw a huge wrench in the case, but the prosecution had an explanation. If Tom was drugged and barely conscious, she wouldn't have needed much force to cut off his oxygen. Just 4 pounds of pressure, lighter than a handshake, could have been enough. What made the whole thing even more bizarre was what happened after. Jade allegedly kept Tom's body in her car overnight. The next morning, she tried staging it like an overdose. And the problem? Tom was 180 pounds, and she couldn't lift him alone. So what did she do? She actually drove to a hospital, stole a wheelchair, and brought it back to Tom's place, planning to roll his body inside. But the whole idea flopped because the car was too cramped to get the wheelchair in. When cops asked her if she knew Tom was dead by then, she admitted she did, but said she hadn't fully accepted it yet. During the trial, the whole case revolved around Jade. The prosecutors kept drilling into everyone's heads that this wasn't about Tom. The poor guy never even got the chance to defend himself. On the other hand, Jade had already played judge, jury, and executioner all by herself. Her lawyer tried to flip the script, though. He was like, "Listen, guys, this whole case is built on guesswork, not real proof." He even called out one witness, Adam, saying the guy was just making up stories to save his own skin. And then there was Brian Salomon, who claimed Jade asked him to choke Tom the moment he walked in. But the twist? They had never even met before. The weirdest part? Neither Adam, Salomon, nor Roach were ever charged with anything. Her lawyer kept saying, no body, no case, like there was no hard proof of murder, only suspicion. But the prosecutors came prepared. They laid out every little text message, from Jade admitting she drugged Tom to her final message, telling Roach to wipe her number. It was like connecting the dots of a murder plot in plain sight. The jury also went into deliberation, and guess what? It took them just 15 minutes to come back with a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Jade was sitting there totally stunned, like she couldn't believe what just happened. During her sentencing in March 2023, Jade finally opened up. She called Tom this manipulative, creepy figure who'd been actually controlling her life for years. Her own dad stood up and said he understood why she snapped, because even he felt betrayed by Tom. Jade admitted she covered up Tom's body but swore she didn't kill him. But by then, the damage was already done, and the judge gave her 25 years to life. The whole case still leaves this weird aftertaste, Like if the cops hadn't shown up when they did, Jade probably would have gotten away with everything. Even now, people can't decide if she's a cold-blooded killer or just a broken woman who finally snapped. What do you think? Revenge or straight-up murder? Tell us in the comment section. We are definitely up for a debate. And almost same type of question also came in front in this next case, where you will meet this man, the unluckiest man alive. He had married twice, and both his wives died mysteriously in the accidents in the secluded hiking area. But what if these accidents and deaths are not really coincidence? What if these are murders? Watch Ty's next case to know the truth that will shock you to the core. Subscribe to the channel for more, and see you soon.